Why, hello. You're continuing your little journey on the elements of lit. Alright, we're going to get started here. Why does my phone keep beeping? Anyway, welcome back, okay? Previously, on the elements of literature, we discussed theme and how theme is going to be an entire lesson on its own, so go ahead and ignore that one. And then we also talked about tone and mood and why you need to be in tune with your own emotions and things like that. We talked about these three questions, if I can pull them up here. These three questions are going to help you identify tone and mood. All right, moving on to the next thing, which is going to be vastly important. That is conflict. Okay, conflict is one of my favorite things to teach. We're probably going to use a good chunk of space on our page, so just keep it in mind. I have about half the notebook here. That's perfect. Okay, conflict. What is conflict? It is the overall problem of the story. It's the overall problem of the story. Okay, now we need to make a little distinction here. So with conflict, there are ways to express conflict, and then there are types of conflict. They are two completely different things. So just in case you need to see the PowerPoint slide and you need to pause it, go ahead and pause it right now. Otherwise, here's how we're going to set this up, okay? So for conflict, I'm just going to do a little arrow down, and I'm going to say forms. Or you could say expressions, representations. I'll say expressions. I haven't done that. So these are the ways to express your conflict types, which we're going to do on the next slide. Okay, the first way that you can have this is called internal. Internal means inside your brain. Inside your brain. Or inside your character, if you want to do it that way. Then you have external. External means outside, so it's going to mean outside your head. I can talk today. That is the thing. Outside your brain. Magical. Okay? Those are the different ways that you can do that. Now, for all of the types that I have on the next slide, you can do this either internally or externally. It just really depends on the story and what you need it to do, okay? So for this, I'm going to do a little arrow down, and I'm going to say types. Types, okay? Now, usually when I do this lesson with my students, I always have them like throw out examples that they know. Since I am talking to an empty room and a camera right now, I'm just going to provide as many examples as I can myself. All right, so that's just how it is. Okay, one quick little check right here in case you needed to see the PowerPoint slide one more time. And we're going to move on. So we're going to do, I think it's like 8 or 9 different types. So I have a pretty sizable list here, so just kind of keep up. Now, I'm going to describe all of these types of conflict like this, if you guys want to look at the slide. Man versus man. Now, when I say man versus man, I do not mean men. I don't mean boys. I mean like mankind, okay? The only reason why I'm not calling it something like character versus character or whatever is because you would probably get sick of writing the word character so many times. I'm going to write it a bunch, but you're probably going to get bored of it, so yeah, that's just how it is. Okay, I'm going to, like, I think just maybe abbreviating character to CH period or something. I don't know. You do you, fam. That's just how it is. Okay, first type of conflict is man versus man. So I'm going to say man versus man. What is man versus man? Oh yeah, by the way, I would recommend writing descriptions for all of these. There are some students that decide not to write the descriptions, and then they don't know what these things are. So, don't be that person. Okay, man versus man. This is when you have a character fighting another character. That's it. Character fighting another character. Which is basically most stories. So that could be like Harry Potter. It could be, the example that I have already pulled up would be like Goku and Vegeta fighting. Yeah. Goku and Vegeta going at it, if you guys know what Dragon Ball Z is. Another example would be like Naruto and Sasuke. Wow, look at that. Their color palette even complements each other. It's like it's a thing or something. It's like it's a thing or a symbol. Funny how that works, right? Okay, so characters fighting other characters. This is more traditionally known as like hero versus villain. It's kind of all the same thing, you know. Whatever. Next, you're going to have man versus society. For this definition, I would heavily encourage you to write it exactly how I have it. Man versus society. The reason why I have this is because there are two words here that I want you to get. This is when a character is fighting against the government or some sort of tradition or like establishment, okay? So character fighting, I'm just going to say gov/tradition. Now, if you guys are into dystopian literature, like you've probably heard of The Hunger Games, you probably know what that is. You've probably heard of Divergent. You've probably heard of The Fifth Wave. Maybe you've heard of The Darkest Minds. Maybe you've read Unwind, which is an amazing series, and I highly recommend. You know, maybe you took my advice and you've read, this is what Unwind looks like by Neil Shusterman. Maybe you've read Red Rising. Maybe you've seen Scythe. Or the Chaos Walking series, whatever, okay? All of those are relatively dystopian stories, okay? The granddaddy of all dystopian literature, however, is got to be 1984. Now, 1984 by George Orwell, or Eric Arthur Blair is his real name. This is not the first novel to do dystopian literature. There was a story, I believe, don't quote me on this because I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but there's a book called We by, I think, a Russian author that predates this one. But 1984 is very, very, very well known as being the granddaddy of all dystopian literature. So, what is 1984 about, okay? This is like the definitive book about a character going against a government, because in 1984, you have a government that is called Big Brother, and Big Brother has effectively monitored all of society and controlled all of society, and Big Brother's always watching. Free thought is illegal. Free romance is illegal. Yeah, that like the government teaches kids to spy on their parents and things like that. The government openly tortures people. Like the government is perpetually in a state of war and constantly lies to its own citizens about being in war and encourages its citizens to be racist. Like, I think that every single teenager on the face of the earth needs to read this book because this book is absolutely important. This was my copy as a kid, and yeah, this book is extremely important. It is literally a book about understanding how power can control people who are uneducated or unaware, and it's just really good. The main character is Winston Smith, I believe, and did I get that name right? He's a character who is working for Big Brother in a department where he has to modify historical records for things like photographs and whatever. And so he literally will like reshape parts of history to fit the agenda of Big Brother. And the whole plot is that he like falls in love with a girl he shouldn't fall in love with. And oh my God, every single kid needs to read that book. No, I don't have this book right in front of me, but let me go see if I can grab it real quick. Anyway, I'm back. Okay, so I guess somebody took my hardcover copy, but I do have copies of books to show you. So anyway, if you like 1984 and you want another book like that, I would extremely recommend reading this book, which is called The Handmaid's Tale. This is basically, I'm definitely kind of like, you know, undermining the book a little bit, but this was basically a female 1984. I think every girl should read this book. It is extremely important. There's also a graphic novel version, which is absolutely fantastic and has lovely illustrations in here. So there's also a television series that was made on Hulu. That's really good. There's also, I believe this is a sequel. I haven't actually read it yet, but it's supposed to be an extension or a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale. So that exists. And I just want to throw out here, since we're talking about dystopian literature, I also have in my classroom the full V for Vendetta series. So in case you guys, if you're from my class and you ever wanted to check that out, there you go. Okay, anyway, man versus society is when a character is going up against government or tradition. Now, to touch on the tradition side, This could be like a story like The Lottery. This could be tradition from like maybe the family has a religious tradition, something like that. So this is when a character is fighting against some kind of establishment. Okay. Tradition could mean a lot of different things. It could be family, it could be religious, it could be institutional, it could be a school. It just kind of depends on how you want to define that. And society is really vague anyway, because society could obviously mean a group of people. All right, man versus nature. Sorry, I'm ranting a little bit. I am trying to be quick, but I do want to give examples if I can. Like I said, most of the time my kids are throwing out examples themselves. So, man versus nature, what is that? This is when a character is going against natural forces. That's the term that I would use. Character fighting natural forces. So this would be any doomsday movie or disaster movie. One of my students brought up San Andreas, 2012. Twister is what was popular when I was young. The example that I usually use in my classroom is Sharknado, just because everyone knows what that is. So Sharknado is literally a movie about a tornado that has sharks in it. They somehow made like 5 of these. I have no clue how. I have been told it is a very bad movie, but that would work. Any movie that involves going into space, pretty much right there is going to be man versus nature. So, yep, that's the thing. Next, man versus self. Just basically every story ever in the history of ever, including real life. Man versus self is going to be when a character is having personal struggles. So a character has personal struggles. They're going through the strugles. Personal struggle is obviously going to be really, really open-ended. That could be things like maybe a character is not confident they can achieve something. Maybe they're not confident they can win a competition. Maybe they are depressed. Maybe they are LGBT and they're trying to work out their feelings. It could be a lot of different things. So that's why I basically say like this is every story ever, because if you had a character that didn't have personal struggle, then you'd barely have a story. It would be boring. Okay, next, man versus fate or God. Man versus fate/God. I'm lumping God in with this one because in the classical sense, the gods, like the Greek gods, would inadvertently do things to people and it would become their fate. So I'm kind of lumping these together. Okay, really quick, just to make sure that you're keeping up with me. If you need to see the PowerPoint slide, go ahead and pause it right here. But I think we're keeping up just fine. Man versus fate or God. This is when a character is fighting. I said divine, means like heavenly, divine or supreme forces. That is the easiest way to look at it. Okay, there are a lot of different examples of man versus fate or God. One of the most iconic examples that one is going to find is going to be like the Odyssey. Okay, the Odyssey is that story of Odysseus, the Greek warrior who made Poseidon angry, took a bajillion years to get home. All right, the next example that a lot of kids are going to know is going to be God of War. Okay, personally, I prefer God of War on PS2, but that's just me. The original, the OG God of War. That's where I was at, man. You had Kratos, and he was a really, really, really angry man who just wanted to get revenge. So good. Anyway, God of War is great. That is literally man versus fate or God. Other examples of this could be like a character who is attempting to maybe stop a destiny or something like that. The example that I love to give in my classroom, which is one of the best video games I've ever played, is the Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver series. So Soul Reaver, I'm going to bring this up a couple of times, like with the symbolism video. But the main character you see right there in the picture, his name is Raziel. Raziel is a vampire who was betrayed by the person who turned him into a vampire, and so he seeks out revenge. Now, the villain, who is called Kain, has the sword called the Soul Reaver, and the Soul Reaver contains the soul of a very hyper-aggressive vampire. I can't give away too much. So Raziel basically comes back from the dead. He is revived by somebody who is known as the Elder God, and then he eventually obtains the Soul Reaver, and it turns into a Wraith Blade that is permanently attached to his right arm, and that becomes his symbiotic weapon. Oh my god, this series is amazing. If you like vampire stuff in general, like, this series is great. The reason why it's Man versus Fate or God is because you find out throughout the series that Raziel is literally the only character who has true free will, and the reason being is because Cain, the villain, who I guess becomes an anti-hero at some point, the antagonist, Cain, inadvertently trapped himself down preset destinies because of his refusal to self-sacrifice for something that he needed to do. So basically every character in the series of Soul Reaver is trying to manipulate Raziel into doing something that will benefit themselves rather than Raziel. And there's very, very few characters in that are friends of his. You also have a character called the Elder God who is trying to manipulate Raziel to just become a little servant, and it's really, really good. Okay, that's Man versus Fate or God. All right, stick with the Odyssey. It's the easiest example. Next, Man versus Supernatural. I know I ramble a lot on these notes, but if you don't have examples or you don't have context for these things, then just writing down the notes as it is not going to really do you much. So, okay, Man versus Supernatural. A lot of my female students will be like, oh my god, I watched Supernatural. Well, congratulations, you know what that is. You know what Supernatural means. This is a character... Sorry, my handwriting is getting really small. Character fighting... I was going to space this out, but I didn't know if I'd have enough space. Character is fighting against... I would... let's see, did I add it on there? Yeah, paranormal or bizarre forces. They're fighting paranormal / bizarre forces. Sorry, I'm kind of squeezing that in there. Okay, I would put a little like star or asterisk next to that one because we're going to talk about that one later. Just to give you some examples of that one. So paranormal forces should be like pretty standard. Like if you have ghosts, if you have vampires, if you have aliens, if you have just monsters in general, that would count as paranormal. So a lot of kids know what Supernatural is. A lot of kids know what the Vampire Diaries or True Blood is. Game of Thrones could work. Like, there's a ton of different stories that cover that. Paranormal Activity, The Conjuring, which is amazing. Yeah, there you go. Now, the reason why I say bizarre forces is if you guys remember back in the setting video, I brought up that author H.P. Lovecraft who invented that whole realm of elder gods and, you know, giant monsters and things like that. That would be covered under that category. H.P. Lovecraft stuff is definitely bizarre forces. Junji Ito, that Japanese horror writer that I brought up earlier, his stuff would definitely be covered under bizarre forces. Strictly because his work, while it seems paranormal, it is not paranormal. Like, a lot of his stories do have ghosts in them, but the actual things that torture the characters are not literally ghosts. They're like literal manifestations of things that can't be explained. So that would be bizarre forces. Okay, Man versus Tech. Man versus Tech has two different definitions. So you need to be careful on this one, okay? This is, for the first definition, quite literally a character fighting technology. So a character who has to fight a machine somehow. That could be The Matrix, where you have humans against machines. That could be iRobot, where you have Will Smith and a robot trying to find another robot trying to do a thing. That could be Blade Runner. It could be Terminator. It could be Transformers. You know, you have a character literally fighting a machine somehow. So, characters fighting machines. That's the first definition. Okay. The next definition is going to be when you have a character that is going against the advancement of technology, meaning like they don't want technology to get better. So if you've ever seen an old person be like, oh, I can't figure out this dang nap thing, you know, if you've ever seen that kind of deal, that is basically a character who is like against technology getting more advanced. Okay, so anybody fighting against the advancement of tech. So, or just say fighting against machines slash the advancement of tech. Okay. All right. Now there's one last one. After we do the last one, I'll give you some more examples of other categories. So the last one is something that one of my students brought up, and they were like, "Hey, Demony, isn't this like a thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're totally right. I can't believe I don't have that on here." It's Man versus Time. It's a really common one. Man versus Time. This is when you have a character fighting against the clock. Character fighting against the clock. So, a lot of sports movies actually do that quite a bit because they're like, oh man, we have to get ready in time for the big competition or things like that. Like if you've ever seen the movie Bring It On, yeah, that totally fits that one. That fits actually a lot of these. Okay, so other examples real quick because I forgot to bring them up. So let's talk about Supernatural real quick. If you guys have ever seen this movie or heard of this movie, Annihilation with Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaac, this is an incredibly good sci-fi movie. That is definitely Supernatural right there. You have a team of female scientists that have to go into this zone, so to speak, that has been like infected by alien activity, and they can't really figure out what's going on. Very, 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 very good movie. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10. The book is not that great, though. The book is kind of horribly boring. This is one of those rare instances where I think the movie is way better than the book. Now, if you like that director and you want another movie by him, that same director made this movie, Ex Machina, which is also starring Oscar Isaac. This would be Man vs. Tech in multiple ways because you have a character. If I can click on the picture, Oscar Isaac is the dude on the right. He's basically a designer, engineer, scientist who is trying to invent artificial intelligence. And like, if anybody knows anything about sci-fi, AI is really a bad thing, or at least it's very dangerous. So things happen in that. All right. For Man vs. Time, okay, I have this example, Speed. Speed, starring Keanu Reeves, which is a terrible film, but it's one of my favorites. This is like, imagine baby John Wick. This is our baby John Wick. So Speed is this movie about Keanu Reeves. He's like a cop, and he's on a bus, and the bus has a bomb on it. All right, and if the speed of the bus drops under 50, the bus explodes. And if it hits anything, it explodes. And if anybody gets off the bus, it explodes. It's a really, really, really cheesy movie, but it's one of my favorites. And yeah, I would highly recommend that. If it's ever on Netflix, you enjoy that one. It's good. Okay, there's one last one for Fate or God that I forgot to bring up. So this right here is my Norton Anthology of Shakespeare Literature. You can see it's basically the size of a brick. That's because it is one. So I wanted to bring up something here. A lot of my students, especially my freshman kids, have read Romeo and Juliet, which is, gross. It's boring. That's just my opinion. Okay. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Romeo and Juliet, like with every Shakespearean tragedy, these characters are going to die. So, spoiler alert for Romeo and Juliet, they die. Okay. These two teenagers are killed. Now, here's the thing. How is this Fate or God? All right. Here's what you need to understand about Shakespeare. Okay. He doesn't like plot armor. So, you can tell right from the title of the original play, the most excellent and lamentable tragedy of Romeo and Juliet. You can tell right off the bat, oh, these people gonna die, right? Now, skipping the character list, you're brought into the chorus, the prologue, okay? And this is what it says. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, okay? So in Verona, we have these two families. Boom, there you go. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Wow. Okay, so here's the thing. A lot of people, I don't know why, but a lot of people will say that star-crossed lovers means that like, oh, the romance isn't going to work out, or maybe they're going to have immense difficulties, or it's fated to be these two characters who like shouldn't be together, but they will be together. That's not what star-crossed means, okay? The stars being crossed with one another quite literally means that the heavens, the gods, whatever you want to call it, are angry. They're pissed off, right? And so these star-crossed lovers are fated to be killed. They're fated to die right there in like the first opening scene of Romeo and Juliet. That means that the heavens are not on their side. Like, to be cross with somebody is to be angry at them. So there you go. Okay. And since it's talking about an ancient grudge, maybe the heavens are pissed off because the two families just couldn't get their crap together. They've just been fighting all this time. I don't know. But that is a thing. Okay. So here's the thing. Wow, I tried to make a little bracket there, and that did not work. I am not an artist. Okay, ignore that. That's gross looking. Anyway, here's the thing you need to understand, my children, or fellow teachers watching this. I don't know who's watching this. Anyway, so with conflict, okay, the reason why we put a star next to man versus supernatural is this. You need to understand, like, there are going to be some teachers or situations, maybe college books, maybe things like prepackaged educational programs. I don't know, man. There's going to be things that are going to be like, no, this right here is the conflict, and there are no other possible types. Well, I really encourage my kids to think outside the box here, and I would encourage you to try and understand that what matters is your interpretation of the story, okay? So the thing you need to get out of this is this. All of these types of conflict will exist in stories. And I mean like all stories, okay? Every single story is going to have all of these things in some way, with the exception of man versus supernatural, okay? The reason why man versus supernatural is not really included is because it requires to have aliens, ghosts, or monsters, okay? But for the other ones, you are more than likely going to have that there somehow, okay? What really matters is, can you make an argument for that conflict to work, all right? When my students are analyzing conflict in my class, I require them to pull out 3 types of conflict, and they have to tell me how. So if you're watching something like The Dam Keeper or Toy Story or, Moana, you just have to come up with an argument for all of these things. And, if you've seen Moana, I could do it right now. So man versus man, you literally have Moana fighting against the evil monster at the end, whose name I can't remember. She's made of lava, so on and so forth. There you go. Or fighting Maui. Man versus society. Moana literally has to go against her family's wishes to leave the island, and eventually she is assisted in doing so, and she does. It is tradition for her to stay on the island and be their queen, and she doesn't want to. Man versus nature. Moana has to literally fight the ocean because it's a dangerous journey. And that's the thing. She has to fight the elements. Man versus self. There are occasions where she literally feels like she's not up to the task, but she quickly bounces back. Man versus fate or God. That's going to be a little more complicated, but you could argue that Moana being chosen by the ocean or whatever in the beginning of the movie quite literally puts her down a predestiny to be fated to save everything, right? Plus, if you do your research on Moana, you'll know that her name literally means water. So there you go. That's a thing. Man versus supernatural. Bizarre forces. You could argue that supernatural elements. Okay, actually, this could work when Moana goes to the underworld and she has to fight the giant crab. That guy who sings a horrible song. That's the worst song in the whole movie. That whole part, she's literally in the land of the dead. So even that could work, or that could be man versus man too. Man versus technology. There are multiple times where Moana has to deal with issues on her ship, and that could work. Or you could talk about Maui having to get off of his little island and how he doesn't have a ship, so he does not have the technology to do something. That could work if you argue it the right way. Man versus time. Yeah, that's there because Moana's island is decaying and she has to do this task of saving the world, or saving her island at least. She has to do that within a time limit, otherwise things are going to go bad. So, okay, man, right there, I just did it with Moana. All these types of conflict are there. You could do the same thing with Frozen or any other like Pixar Disney film, any other Toy Story film, any other Disney or Pixar film, okay? I hope that makes you understand, like, all stories have these somehow. You just have to come up with an argument for how they work, okay? Don't be that kid. I just want to write down here. Sorry, I put a little arrow down here. I forgot to fill it out. My head's going at 80 miles an hour because I drank a Monster Energy drink. Okay, anyway. All types can work. Sorry. All types can work. What matters is, can you argue for them? Can you argue for them? Okay, all types of conflict can work. What matters is, can you argue for them? Don't be that student who's like, hey, can you check this? I want to make sure it's right. Can you make an argument for it? Because if you can, if you think you can, it's already correct because you're already there. Because every single story has all of these things. And I'm sure there will be some people who will like go out of their way to try and find a story that doesn't have one of these. But I think for the most part, for the vast majority of stories, you're going to have a majority of these things in some way, shape, or form. Okay? Anyway, boom. Enough talking. There's conflict. Okay, the next element we're going to cover is going to be symbolism. Symbolism you're going to need a lot of space for, so just be prepared and stay tuned for that video. Go solve some conflicts in your life. That'd be great.